Now, one of the things that certainly the freshmen have been studying, along with the chemistry students, and the physics students would remember probably from a while ago, but it might pop up on the physics B exam as well, is a discussion of temperature and states of matter, and gas laws are definitely on the physics B exam. So I'll let Mr. DiGrando talk about those things.
This is in what form right now? What state of matter? It's a liquid. But if you pour it, it rolls off, and then it's not going to get your clothes wet or anything, because it's very quickly turned into what?
Gas.
A gas. Which is the higher state of matter? The gas or the liquid? The gas is much higher. So to get it down to that liquid state, they have to take energy out of it. And we do that basically by, we refrigerate it. And when you take a high energy substance such as a gas and you make it cold, you take energy from it, what happens, and freshmen, you guys should know this also, let's say gas laws, you take a gas and you cool it. What happens to the volume of the gas? It should get smaller. It should decrease. So if we take the nitrogen and I put this balloon in the liquid nitrogen, what should happen to it?
Putting the top on once.
Oh, yeah?
Grab something cold. Kind of crush it on the top.
And then what should happen to the balloons if we take them out of the liquid nitrogen?
Wait, that's my favorite. Take that off.
Was that a helium one?
Yeah.
Now, kids, we inflated these balloons, just blowing them up this morning, and the air begins with about 21% oxygen. You use a very small amount of that. When you exhale, it still has about 19% oxygen. The boiling point of oxygen is actually higher than that of nitrogen. So if we look very closely, you can see a liquid in the bottom of that balloon. That's liquefied oxygen, which of course will boil and help reinflate the balloon. If we find a state. Okay. I have here in this cup probably about, 6 times 10 to the 23rd molecules of nitrogen. Okay? It's a number that chemists use, and it's called a mole. Now, at standard temperature and pressure, which is kind of very close to the conditions in this room, we're a little bit warmer than standard conditions, but we're also at a little bit higher altitude, so less pressure. The 2 tablespoons of liquid nitrogen in here would expand to fill the same space as about 11 2-liter pop bottles. So while that boils inside the milk jug, that rapid expansion of the space, the difference between the close packed particles of a liquid and the far apart particles of a gas, actually brings around some kind of interesting safety features. This doer costs about $2 grand, okay? And you would think for $2 grand they'd get you a lid that fits. But by design, the lid does not screw into the top. And by design, there's a couple of holes drilled in it so that it will vent. For what reason? So it doesn't explode, okay? Working with this stuff once before, I heard a story of a colleague who wanted to take some home and show his kids. So he put it in a coffee thermos, screwed the lid up, and he got about, this is while I was working in Golden, and he got, a couple miles down I-70 before it exploded in the backseat of his car in the middle of rush hour traffic. Pretty exciting.
And just still on its gaseous form, when you take it and you put it in contact with something hot, it's going to very quickly change from liquid to a what? To a gas. And so that's kind of fun if you've got hot coffee. Now, if I were to take a drink of this, what would happen? Now, I really didn't get any of the water in there, but as far as like, is this liquid becoming poison when I'm drinking? It's not, because nitrogen is the main component of what? It's the main thing of air. 80%, I think about 80% of our air is nitrogen. So it's not poisoning this drink. It's making it cold and making it taste like crap. But it's not really poison. What's also done, this is basically the same little demo, but it's more dynamic, is if I take some bubble solution here and pour it in. I get super fun bubbles.
You know, chemistry teachers do some of the coolest haunted houses. Halloween.
Yes, they go.
Love trick or treating.
Oh, and just still while we're on gases, it's fun to make little balloon animals and take your dog for a walk. And Fido's like, I want to go play in the snow. Lassie, go save Fido. That looked like fun. And, all right, when you take materials, especially plastics, and you make them colder, what happens to their flexibility? Yeah, they get all brittle. So we can take something super fun. Racquetball, which is normally pretty bouncy. These guys out here. Better days. Now we'll put the racquetball in here.
It shattered.
Actually, have you put that in here before? Or? Okay.
That's not cool.
Yeah, we may want to fill that up. You want to do the banana hammer song? Oh, wait.
This demonstration actually came out of essentially some scientists being bored. And when I worked at NREL, there was a morning where we were doing an experiment with liquid nitrogen, and kind of had one of those, hey, I wonder if, and a quick lunchtime trip to Walmart, and about 20 seconds later we said, hey, that was cool. Okay. Now, like Mr. Beck said, living things are primarily, you're 70% water. And when water freezes, we all know that those crystals expand. The key is what? Freeze quickly, and therefore crystals are small. Because if we freeze slowly, big crystals, a little bit hard on the cell membrane, right? Okay. Now you have to know, like, lifetime, I'm about 50 and 0. Okay? Hello? He's alive, he's flopping. He's not flopping. Think warm thoughts. Now seriously, let's give it up for the fish. Pay attention. You will see, if you watch the news, read the newspapers in around February, the city of Nederland, which is just west of Boulder, go figure, every February has a festival called Frozen Dead Guy Days. In 1974, a Norwegian man who lived there, named Cherokee died of cancer. His grandson, in the hopes that someday a cure for cancer would be found, had Grandpa frozen. And Grandpa is stored in a tough shed in Nederland. There was a movie made about it called Grandpa's in the Tough Shed. It's a documentary film. It's about half an hour. You can see it. And one problem was this grandson was deported back to Norway. So now the friendly townspeople of Nederland, Colorado, hold a festival every year so that they can pay to maintain the liquid nitrogen and dry ice that they use to keep Grandpa, you know, frozen. Okay. Check for that in February.
How long has he been like that?
He has been like that since about 1988, I believe it is. I'm not sure. Now, what are some of the issues with that? We're talking about something small that we can freeze pretty confidently so that the outside layer of ice doesn't form insulation that protects the inside or causes the inside to freeze slowly and cause large crystals to form. This is the CTHS Science Department's Adopt a Fish program, okay, by the way. You're welcome to any one of these after school if you bring your own container. The last demonstration that we have for you.
Now, there's a question out there. Could we ever, the Austin Powers, freeze a human?
Yes.
All right? Here's the thing. Is the idea out there, but us humans are pretty complex. A fishy's kind of smaller, so we would not freeze instantly. All right? With the rocks. Do we have to... All right? Some of you have seen this. Have you ever seen this before? Where does it come from?
Volcanoes.
All right,
Volcano.
it comes directly out of a volcano. It's very glassy, I guess if you want to think about it like that. It's called obsidian glass. What happens is that molten rock shoots out of that volcano and cools so fast that not a single crystal can grow. Do you see any individual crystals in there, Dal?
Say yes.
No, it's pretty, you can't really tell one piece from the next. Then look at this piece. You guys can pass these around. Okay? You can see the individual crystals, because that rock cooled really slowly, so these crystals could grow and grow. All right, what's most of living things made out of? Good drink. Very good hint. Water. Okay, so if something that is made of 70% water has a long time to cool down to ice, those ice crystals can grow, and they're very sharp. So what happens to your poor cell? Okay, all your cells die. But what if you can freeze those cells without having having those crystals grow. All right? All right. This first time I've
Get a
this
big
one.
one.
Which one? Who's?
The silver one. The big old silver one, dog. Yeah, get that one. That one's a...
Okay. So we have Fluffy.
You murderer.
That's good.
Oh, you're funny, dog. You're funny.
Oh, poor.
He likes shit.
See my luck.
Whoa.
Go.
Yeah, but leave
I did not kill a fish. That's very good. All right, so he's a little disoriented. He went to sleep in a net, and he woke up in a whole different bowl. But, okay, do those crystals have a long time to grow?
His skin is falling off.
His skin's falling off.
So there's orange in the bottom of the cup.
No, that's a chunk of carnation from the last class.
Yeah.
Trust me, you can look more closely after class, okay?
See,
No,
okay,
the
you
skin
okay,
is not
buddy?
falling off.
Why is it orange?
That's his lucky fin.
Yeah, that's his lucky.
Try again.
All right.
I've
Do
seen
it again.
him
Do it again.
Do another one.
We're gonna let him kind of calm down.
Leave
Do the yoga.
Let him be with his
Leave it in
family.
there for longer.
All right.
Leave it in there for like 5 minutes.
Super conductor.
Pour the nitrogen in that one.
Mr. D.
Today is liquid nitrogen day. Nitrogen normally is in what form? Normally a gas. Is nitrogen poisonous? If you inhale nitrogen, you're going to die? Everybody go. Now with the sound too, everybody. You just inhaled nitrogen. About 80% of your breath, 80% of the air, about 80% is nitrogen. What we've done is, well, not what we've done. What we've done is we've gotten some nitrogen that instead of being in the gaseous form, has more or less energy.
More. I mean less.
More, I mean less. Less energy in the liquid state. Well, here's where water boils. This is like an actual scale of where we're going today. Water boils 100 degrees Celsius, 212 Fahrenheit. Freezes at 0. This is kind of, body temperature, room temperature, somewhere up here. We're a little colder than that. So as you walk down the scale, we get to like dry ice, negative 80 Celsius. That's pretty cold, right? Coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth, Vostok Station in Antarctica, Russian research station down there, negative 89 Celsius. And look, it was in the middle of August. You'd think if they took it in December, it'd be even colder, right?
Wrong.
We did. We did. My people, my folks know the answer. What's the answer?
When it's
Seasons switch. It's winter there in August. But we can get colder than that. We can go to the dark side of the moon and get to 153 below 0. That's pretty cold. Even colder than that, we get to 77 Kelvin, negative 196 Celsius. That's the freezing. That's the condensation point of nitrogen. That's when it turns from a gas to a liquid. That's what's in here. That's what's in here. That's what's in here. So it's pretty cold. We're only this far above absolute 0. And at absolute 0, what happens to the motion of all the molecules? Stops. So nitrogen, pretty darn cold. Not quite as cold as Pluto. So if you went to Pluto, you could find like some solid nitrogen. But this is the range that we're dealing with right here. So if you take just a little bit of nitrogen in its liquid form, what does it look like it's doing? Evaporating. It's boiling. Is it boiling because it's hot? Well, compared to its temperature, my hand is pretty hot, right?
yeah.
It's like hundreds of degrees hotter than the liquid nitrogen. So if I put liquid nitrogen on my hand, it instantly boils away. Okay? So this is boiling liquid nitrogen. But it just boils away. But for it, boiling is at this temperature. Pretty darn cold. Now some of you have studied Charles Law and Boyle's Law, yes? Chemistry, yeah? Done a little bit of that? What happens when you increase the temperature of something? The volume goes up. I tell my kids that, everybody do it, ready? Temperature goes up, volume goes up, temperature goes down, volume goes down. So all my kids go like this during the test.
Okay.
So I have some volume. Volume. What's going to happen to this balloon when I put it in the...
It's gonna pop.
Pop is a good
It's
guess.
gonna shrink.
Think I can fit more than one balloon in here?
I don't wanna.
Little one. Big one. Remember the end of Mary Poppins?
Yeah.
When she's packing up and going away? You know, please don't go, Mary Poppins. And she takes like the big thing and she just sticks it right in her bag. And it just kind of crushes down into nothing. You know, she takes the plant and puts it in.
Yeah.
You've seen that? That's like this. You take the dog and you go, oh, please don't go, Mary Poppins. And, okay. You got the, so temperature is going from like about here to about here. So the volume's doing the same thing. Same kind of a... See that? Should have seen that coming. What? TV? It's like the clowns in the circus, right? Temperature goes down, volume goes down. I fit a whole bunch of balloons in here. What's going to happen to the balloons when I pull them out?
Go back up.
That'd be cool.
Going up again. Going up.
Not even throw that at you.
Now, kids, just real quick by way of introduction, some of you have not met Mr. Beck before. He teaches AP and IB physics and teaches ICSP, and Mr. DiGrando teaches chemistry and teaches physics and teaches ICSP. And for the folks in their classes who don't know me, I'm Mr. Fennell and I teach AP and IB chemistry and chemistry. So welcome to all the classes, and I'll let Mr. DiGrando show the next.
Now, you guys have talked about states of matter and which is a higher energy. We've got either liquid nitrogen and it's very quickly becoming a gas. Which is a higher state of matter? Or higher energy?
Yeah.
It's the gas. And as soon as it comes in contact with anything hotter, then it instantly boils and becomes a gas, which is pretty awesome. Now the table we talked about before, it's not heated up. But why does it cause this to boil so quickly?
Boiling point is
Yeah, this has a very low boiling point, and relative to liquid nitrogen, that table is super, super hot. That's like if you, this walking around on the table is like if you started walking around on a skillet with bare feet. It'd be very painful. But if we take this and put it in something even warmer than the table, like hot coffee, then it's going to turn into a gas super, super fast, and it's pretty cool. Then you put this, and then you get a little smokestack thing. Now, how safe is this to drink?
not safe. I don't know.
I can't blow it out. But it is safe to drink because I'm putting in liquid nitrogen, which people are like, oh, liquid nitrogen is poisonous. But you're around nitrogen every day of your life. How come? It's in the air. Does anyone know what percent of air it makes up? Yeah, 80% of the air is nitrogen. So all you're doing is basically, all I'm doing is putting air in my coffee. Granted, it's cooling it down a lot and making it not taste very good, but it's not poisonous. I can do a similar thing, which is really no different, except it's a little bit more dynamic. Except that this is bubble solution. Same stuff that you dip the wand in and make cool bubbles, except it's been heated up and it's more fun.
is why you all should go trick-or-treating at Mr. DeGrando's house, by the way.
And all these bubbles are filled with what? With air, basically nitrogen gas. Next.
Now when things get cold, what happens to your fingers when you get cold?
No.
They get numb. Can you like open them and close them as quickly?
No.
No. That's actually a different thing, but do you think the properties of something like plastic tubing might change when I put it in liquid nitrogen? Freeze it down? Balloons are made of these very long chains of molecules, polymers, and these molecules are allowed to, like, they crink and they bend and slide past each other a little bit in the solid, and that's what allows the tube to be flexible, what allows the balloon to be flexible. But if I take this and I happen to introduce it to liquid nitrogen, go ahead. So it's cooling down, it should change a little bit. Here's another thing that is commonly flexible. Again, made of rubber and plastic. You find these things that are nice and flexible when they're warm, but we can cool them down as well. Any predictions? What happens?
Great.
Gonna break. What happens to the speed of the molecules as I cool them down? Slow them down, slow them down, slow them down. So I'm getting pretty darn cold with this plastic tubing. So that if I take it out, it's got some different properties now. Whoop.
Twice.
Is that what you expect?
No.
Yeah, it gets kind of brittle, doesn't it? All those molecules can no longer slide past each other, so this is like brittle solid. As it warms up, what do you think is going to happen? Going to go back to normal? Going to go back to bendy? Well, we'll keep an eye on that. What I'm watching for here is this little racquetball in there. Oh, by the way, this container is just, it's a little plastic container and a big plastic container with a lot of foam around it. We want it to insulate and not let all the nitrogen boil away. But as soon as this racquetball stops boiling, then it should be about the same temperature as the nitrogen. Do you want to do one of them?
I just want to see this. I've never tried this before. I'm trying to make.
I've never tried this before. Here, Mr. Beck, you hold it.
That makes a fountain.
Should be higher. Oh, it's frozen inside.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, this tubing is now quite cold. Okay, racquetball.
Good idea. That was good on paper.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, racquetball.
It's mine.
I know, I want to play this over here.
So if you're going to play racquetball on Pluto, don't hang on to it too long. It's still got a lot of cold.
It's mine now.
If you're going to play racquetball on Pluto,
You already saw it.
make sure you heat up the racquetball first.
Oh, that was sweet. Oh, racquetball? Yeah.
Now, kids, another flexible material, just a rubber band. We would expect that the molecules in that rubber band would kink and unkink as we put energy into it and stretch it and so on. But if I stretch it first and then cool it in the liquid nitrogen and basically lock those molecules into place, we can see that I could actually hold it in the stretched position, and as it warms back up, as the molecules move faster and faster, then they regain their ability to slide by one another. Okay? One last demonstration to show you guys, and this is backing up a little bit to the idea of gas laws. The seniors who were in my class last year, if I had in this cup about 28 grams of nitrogen, Okay? About how many molecules might that be?
That's so cool.
It'd be about a mole. Now, if I take that in its liquid state and I turn it into a gas, what volume should it occupy? How's that? 22.4 liters. For the rest of you, a tablespoon and a half of liquid nitrogen as a gas would occupy about 11 2-liter pop bottles. That's a huge change in volume. So if I pour some of that liquid nitrogen into this milk jug and actually pop this stopper on, okay, we can see it pressurizes pretty well. Kids, what's happening is this, is I turn some of those liquid molecules into a gas. If I have more molecules of gas, I have more collisions. If I have more collisions, I have a higher pressure. Enough so that it'll pop the stopper off of that milk jug. Okay? So we've taken a look at some flexible materials. We've talked about states of matter and gas laws. Two other groups of things. See, Mr. Beck teaches physics, so he has to demonstrate Newton's third law and conservation of momentum as well. Okay? Two other classes of materials. Never mind. Just go. Yeah.
So this container we have the nitrogen in on this point, this container is about $2,000, okay? It's called a dewar. It's a container within a container. In between the inside and the outside is just a vacuum. They pulled out all of the air. This is a big, heavy-duty industrial thermos, kind of like this little one as well. But you think for $2,000 they'd give me a top that fits. You know, a top that'll screw on and nice and tight. But they put this loose top and it's got holes in it. Any thoughts as to why? What's going to happen? Not that I would encourage you, of course. Thank you. Bad idea. Yeah. Bad idea. So that's why the top doesn't fit very tightly.
Negative 196 Celsius. The table's all the way up here at room temperature. So it's going to turn into a gas super fast. What happens if I put it in something hot like coffee? What's it going to do?
Sublimate.
It's going to turn into gas even faster. It might freeze the coffee if I have enough of it. But mainly get that same boiling, except it does it super, super fast.
Whoa.
And then if you put the lid on it, you get a little smokestack. Which my favorite thing to do is just walk around drinking this. Because it is drinkable.
No. Is it cold?
It's actually not that cold because I still have so much hot coffee in here. But why is this not poisoning me?
Because there's gas. Turn it to gas. It's just nitrogen.
Yeah, it's just nitrogen, and nitrogen is mainly, it's the main component of air. So it's not a big deal. So what Mr. Beck is going to show you is basically the same thing.
This is a bubble solution, and it's nice and warm. And if we do take a little bit of liquid nitrogen and so remember, always trick or treat at the chemistry and physics teachers' houses because we have the coolest things going on.
Where do you live?
Oh, we got to get more of that.
Yeah.
That's fun.
That's cool.
And what's coming out as I pop the bubbles?
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen. Yeah. So it's really cold. Will it freeze my hand if I pour it on my hand? No, because what happens?
Because it's already gas.
As soon as it hits my hand, it does just like it does on the table. And you get this layer of gas around anything you like put in liquid nitrogen. So, you know, it's cold, but you know, you can do that and not hurt yourself too bad. What's next? Properties of materials.
Yeah, we can probably just, I can do Tygon 2.
Sure.
We have it?
Oh, we are from the end?
Okay. Alright, what I've got is a flexible tubing piece of rubber here, and this is what we call a polymer, which is based on carbon, except what makes it different than, if you just have pure carbon, you've got basically charcoal, and it's all dirty and black. But if you take carbon, you put it in really, really, really long chains and make these super huge molecules, then you get plastics and rubber. And normally, they're very what? Flexible. They're very flexible. And they're flexible because while those big chains of carbon are locked together, they're also somewhat able to slide past one another. And it makes it nice and stretchy. Now, is this a liquid or a solid? Solid. Solid. So if I take this solid and put it in here, I do get kind of a cool fountain. And I'm going to let that chill for a little bit. And then take another same type of object. This is a rubber. It's made of big chains of carbon. And it's filled with air. It's a racquetball. So it's super fun. Put that in here as well. And that's going to boil. I just dropped the Tygon tubing all the way in there. But, yeah. What have I done to it now?
It's like all hard.
Is it frozen now?
Yeah.
But when you freeze something, it goes from liquid to solid. This was actually already frozen. It was frozen from the beginning, but what have I changed on it now? It's colder and the molecules aren't able to slide past one another. So what happens to its properties? It's much harder. And if you actually hit it with a hammer, what's going to happen?
It's shatter.
And it goes flying. Now some of these pieces might have come over near you. If you grab that piece, it's going to be super cold. But give it about 10 minutes, what's going to happen?
Oh, it's already warm. Oh, shoot. I should make it.
So if stretchy things become less stretchy, what if I pre-stretch a rubber band and put it in there?
It'll go.
And I pull it out frozen? Should I keep my fingers in here and do it? No. No, because then the tips of my fingers would become incredibly inflexible. So yeah, I'll do it this way instead. But if I take my rubber band and stretch it, you can see how big it is unstretched. If I stretch it, let me get that in there. That cools down pretty quickly. So there it is. What do you think is going to happen as it warms up? And now it's back to normal. But you take a rubber band, you know, it cools down really quickly. I'm not touching the liquid nitrogen myself. So you don't store your rubber bands in liquid nitrogen.
Oh, you broke it.
Yeah, I broke it. I meant to break it.
Oh.
Is that still boiling?
I just poured some more. Now for fun also, we can also chuck some sugary hors d'oeuvres in the liquid nitrogen.
Throw it over here. Yeah, this is really cold. Feel that.
Alright? Now I've got the racquetball, and what this actually does is it makes the racquetball super bouncy. So watch, this is probably going to go through the ceiling.
Oh, God.
Yes, you did.
I knew that was going to
I can keep
Chelsea, feel it. I know it's like, I want it back. I know it's like, oh, that feels good. I know I gave my
regards to polymers, to plastics, do you think liquid nitrogen will have any effect on metals?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, you wouldn't show it if it didn't, right? We have 2 springs here. These springs are made out of a very soft metal called solder. It's a combination of metals. What I'm going to do is they're made of the same material. I'm going to take one of them and put them in the liquid nitrogen and let it get down to temperature. I have a half a kilogram mass. And if I hang this half kilogram mass on this one, I'll actually hang them at the same time. I'll compare. Where's my tongs? So the atoms in this one are jiggling and moving at, with this much temperature. So all the atoms are jiggling and moving around, and that allows them to kind of bend out of shape. But if I if I slow down the speed of these molecules, what I wind up with is this spring. So any predictions as to what's going to happen when I hang the metals on them?
That one's gonna like lower that
1, 2, 3, and drop.
one.
Now as this heats up, what's going to happen?
It's gonna go down.
It's going to, a little bit by little bit, as it gets warmer and warmer, we'll see it start to like glom on. And that's pretty cool. Next.
Just on kind of the thermal mass of different types of objects, I've got a quarter, and I'll throw the quarter in there. Actually, here's another rubber band that we can break.
Yeah, he'll heat it up pretty quick.
Alright? So this quarter, if I take this and put it in my hand, what's that going to do to my hand? It's going to freeze it. Metals have a pretty high thermal mass. And actually, if I were to hit that with a hammer right now, what's happened to its malleability? It'll probably break. I'm not going to do that because sometimes it tends to fly around like shrapnel. But that would cause some physical pain if I were to hold that in my hand or stick it in my mouth. A marshmallow, on the other hand,
No, don't break it. Let it thaw.
It's like styrofoam.
I kind of feel like Cookie Monster, because and it all just falls out the mouth. But a marshmallow really doesn't have a high thermal mass, and so it cools down really quick, and it heats up really quick, and it doesn't actually freeze my skin because it's got that low thermal mass.
I'm gonna break it.
Okay.
Can you break the penny?
Did it break?
I want to show it.
Okay, in my class, we talked about isotopes of pennium and how pennies now are made out of zinc coated with copper.
Yeah.
When these warm up, you'll be able to take a look at the zinc inside. So I'll just leave those here. Living things.
Ah, yes.
Oh, living things.
We'll start tame. We'll start tame. We'll start with plants. Freezing plants is kind of an issue.
We dumped that out.
Oh, yeah. Stepping on marshmallows. Plants aren't as fun as animals because they don't make the sounds like, no, don't hit me in the liquid nitrogen. Because they can't talk. But freezing plants is an important issue because most of all the vegetables you eat, not most, but some of them are what?
Frozen.
Are frozen. And when you cook them back up, how do you want them to taste?
Yummy.
You want them to taste good, you want them to taste fresh, so you want them to taste as crunchy as fresh corn or fresh broccoli. But the problem with freezing all living things like plants or even animals is that we're made of not 99, but a high percentage of what?
Water.
Of water. And when you freeze water slowly, you get these big, pointy, jagged crystals. And if you've got a couple rocks here, what this pink one is, this is feldspar, it's a large crystal, and it forms slowly. And when you freeze water slowly, it makes large crystals like this with jagged edges. If you freeze water super fast, or anything super fast, you get tiny crystals. This rock here has thousands, hundreds, I don't know, maybe millions of little tiny crystals in here. And it has a real smooth surface. And when you take a vegetable that has water and you freeze it slowly, it gets these big crystals of water. And they grow with these jagged things. And what's that do to the cell walls?
Breaks them.
It breaks them. And so the inside of your broccoli gets all torn up. So then when you heat it back up, what's it look like?
Mush.
It looks like school broccoli. So you want to have fresh broccoli like this. So what they do is, to make things fresh, they flash freeze them. Just like we froze this carnation. So if we let this thaw out, it would be almost as good as new. You could eat this carnation and it tastes just as good as when you ate it the first time. But it'd be kind of boring to let it freeze, so instead, what are we going to do with it? We're going to smash it.
How come you guys got big pieces?
A little bit. That's warm, so that's playing. Right here.
Kill the fish. Is this one?
Now, before we do the fish, which is, you can do some dangerous stuff with liquid nitrogen. You can drink it, and in fact, I can take my finger and put it in there just for a split second at a time. And the reason I'm able to do both those things is because as soon as liquid nitrogen touches something as amazingly hot as my skin, what's it do? It boils and turns into a gas. And it makes a little protective layer of gas between my skin and the rest of the liquid nitrogen. And that protective layer will protect me for how long?
Split second.
Yeah, about a split second. If I hold my finger in here for about 2 minutes and take it out, what happens?
Your finger will
Yeah, then I can take my finger and break it off, and people start crying. I start crying. As a warning, I thought I'd be real funny last year. I'd be funnier than normal. I know that's hard to imagine. But I took the glove, and I told the students I had a special glove from Gore-Tex, and they sent it to me to test out extreme temperatures that not only would protect your flesh, it would also protect you from falling objects in case you dropped, a cinder block on it or something. So what I did was I took a hot dog and I stuffed it in the thumb. And then I took my hand like this and I put it in there and I was like, watch this. And then I just stuck my thumb in the liquid nitrogen. Everyone's like, oh my God. And so I'm holding it in there and people are like, doesn't it hurt? I'm like, nah, it's a pretty good glove. And so then I told them, well, now it's ready to protect my finger from falling objects. So I put it over here next to the group of students and took a hammer and smashed it. The thumb falls off. I'm screaming in pain. Kids up front are throwing up. And then I shook out the hot dog pieces and it was all real funny. So then Mr. Beck goes ahead and is presenting something else, and I'm standing back here with my hand behind my back. I'm thinking, son of a gun, my finger hurts. And what had happened was, I used a cloth glove, which was stupid. And all the liquid nitrogen boiled through the glove, and while it was freezing the hot dog, it was also boiling up and hitting my thumb right there. So I look at my thumb and it's all frozen white. And then after about 10 minutes, I had this huge blister the size of a quarter on my thumb. I almost had to go to the doctor. And so, minor nerve damage, and it turned out okay. So, it can be slightly dangerous if you're a moron.
kids are crying. I would be crying too.
I'd be like, sweet.
So I took my family on vacation. We went to Pluto.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a long drive. You know, it takes light, what, 5.5 hours to get there. So, you know, it's a little longer when you're driving. And I get there just because I'm into carpentry. And I hear that they like have really cool stuff to put into cabinets on Pluto, so I decided to build myself a set of shelves there on Pluto. Unfortunately, I got all the way to Pluto, and I forgot my hammer. But I did bring my lunch, and one thing in my lunch was a banana. So being without a hammer, but with a banana, I just put my banana on the roof of my car, and you know, let it sit up there for a couple minutes, and then pulled it out back into the car, and then I was ready to go to work. So now I had myself a hammer, and if I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. You get the idea, right? And this actually froze pretty well straight through, but it took a long time to freeze, didn't it? Well, I wouldn't eat it right now, but once it warmed up, then maybe it would be edible. Put it in a milkshake or something. It took a while for this thing to cool all the way through, because as soon as you dunk it in liquid nitrogen, the outside forms a layer of ice, and ice is a little bit of an insulator. You know from what you know about Eskimos, what do they build their houses out of? Ice. Ice, right? So that'll keep like the really cold outside so they can heat up a little bit inside. But what that means is the inside of this banana took a really long time to cool. Now you remember before with living tissue, if I can freeze it quickly, how big are the crystals? Small. Really quickly, the crystals are tiny. And they don't get really sharp and they don't break the cell membranes or cell walls of your vegetables. But if I heat it really slowly, I get these really big crystals. So the inside of this banana would be like mush. So that's a problem with heating a banana. But if you can find a living object that is small, that could freeze very quickly, if I can freeze it quickly, how big will the ice crystals be? Really small. So things inside, like hearts and livers and lungs and intestines, will not break with the big ice crystals.
No.
These are two survivors. They have made it. We keep them in a separate jar because we don't think it's fair to put them through that twice.
Yeah, we don't want them to do it twice, and we also don't want these guys talking to these guys. Right? I mean, they can see him from across the way. He's like, hey, what happened to Bob? I don't know, he was here a minute ago. And these guys are like, who are those guys? Huh? Right? So, but they're all volunteers.
None of these guys are here against their will. When I went to Petco, they all jumped out of the tank and into the fishbowl. They wanted to go so badly.
Yeah, they you know, you volunteer for science. So, see, they know, they're volunteers. They're not scared at all. Okay, see this one I named, he's Fluffy. This is Fluffy. He's hopping around.
Yeah, he's dying right now.
You see him flopping? Well, Fluffy's had better days. He's like, what are you doing? There's a frozen Fluffy, okay?
Fluffy.
So let's think good thoughts. Think warm thoughts.
Come on, Fluffy.
Think warm thoughts.
Here you go, Fluff. No, Fluffy, no. Dump him out.
Think warm thoughts. Come on, you're with me. You're with me. Fluffy, Fluffy, Fluffy.
Oh,
He's
Seizures.
Come on, Fluffy. Fluffy.
Kill him.
He's alive.
No, he's coming to see me. He likes me so much, he's coming right to my hand. He's like, thank you, thank you.
That was sick.
He has been to the edge and back. He's been a flatliner. He's back.
He's swimming upside down.
Yeah, he's a little disoriented. Right? He's like, whoa, I I was just in a net. Now I'm in a, what happened? So, he's back.
Emotionally disturbed only. Physically, he's fine.
Yeah. So yeah, Fluffy's okay.
You can't do that with larger animals. Same problems with the banana. If you throw a kitten in there, the outside of the kitten would freeze first, the inside wouldn't. It would be a very painful, inhumane project. But a small animal is possible. What we want to show you guys next, this is kind of tiny and hard to see, but maybe even more amazing. This little disc here is a superconductor. It's a ceramic superconductor, and once you get it cold enough, it starts superconducting, meaning that it'll let electricity flow without any resistance whatsoever. And this has little electrons that are moving around inside it right now, but when we cool it down, they start moving around faster. This little object, this little square guy, is also a magnet. And let me start cooling them down.
There's no more tape left.
Once I start cooling them, those electrons can move basically freely. And if you guys get into physics, you'll learn that if you have moving electric charge, that's going to make a magnetic field. Or if you've got a flipping magnetic field or changing one, you get an electric current, and vice versa. So this is setting up moving electrons in there, and they're going to set up magnetic fields that oppose each other. And if both magnets have opposing magnetic fields, how will they feel about each other?
They're gonna like separate.
They'll hate each other, and they'll start to push each other away.
That's the official physics term, by the way. They hate each other.
Is he gonna do it?
It'll take a second.
It's got to cool down. Unfortunately, at this point, these things have to be very, very, very cold. But we're working on, not we, but folks are working on making these things so we could have superconductors at like regular temperatures. Things more closer to like here. Can you imagine? They're mixing different chemicals together, different isotopes, different combinations of chemicals to try to find the right combination.
It's like spinning. That is so
It's
awesome.
now floating. If I take a little,
Spinning and floating.
That's so cool.
Yes, that is the shiniest.
Now, what could you do with, like, if you could get a superconductor to work at room temperature?
How far can it like rise?
We could have it.
What about a train on superconductors?
Yeah, don't they
Just
have
floating along, no friction. The other thing they're talking about is electricity transmission. If you have electrical lines, they eat up a lot of the electricity. If you try to transport from like solar power plant in Nevada to Massachusetts, all the electricity goes away. But if you could get superconducting electric wires, then those wires would carry with no loss of energy. So this could be a solution to a lot of different things. This is kind of cutting edge of chemical technology.
that is it. Thank you.